Hiya, buddy.
Hi, Glenn. Wel, noswaith dda, chroeso I sgwrs arall yn fyw ar YouTube. A heno fyddwn ni'n siarad gyda Glenn Dene. Good evening, welcome to another live chat, Ffoton chat. And just to remind you guys out there, there's a photography survey, Wales 2020. If you have something to say about photography in Wales, feel free to vent in our survey. And tonight I'm very pleased to welcome the photographer Glenn Dene to the show. And he's done some very important work on a hospital in Wales during the coronavirus pandemic. And is going to be publishing a book through Graffeg on using his pictures, and all the proceeds of that work will go to Air Ambulance and NHS. I'm trying to think of the word. I can think of the word in Welsh, but I can't think of the word in English. But maybe Glenn can explain a little later. Okay, Glenn. I suppose we sort of soldier on, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I started out in photography about 6 years ago. Since then, I started off with landscape photography, street photography, anything really that caught my fancy. Done a couple of exhibitions along the way, and yeah, when this opportunity presented itself, it was a no-brainer really. I wanted to get involved straight away.
And you work in the hospital?
Yeah, I work in Neville Hall Hospital. I'm an operating department practitioner. So I specialize in anesthetics, but we also in our job, we can cover anesthetics, scrub or recover patients. So it's a difficult job at times, but especially at the moment. But yeah, it's something I'm glad that I'm doing.
And access, of course, was paramount in doing this. How did the hospital authorities respond to you wanting to photograph what was going on?
Surprisingly, really, really well. You know, I had a chat to my boss, my Band 7 senior member of staff, who thought it was a good idea. Then I talked to Judith Paget, who's the chief executive, and then to the communications team, and they were all really keen. Maybe they had photographers outside of work as well. So they certainly saw the importance of documenting it, and yeah, as soon as I mentioned it, really, they gave me the go ahead.
Did you start photographing from the very outset?
I think it was 2 or 3 days in. I'd taken a few photos on my mobile phone, but there was only so far I could have gone with that. And a couple of the mobile phone photos are in the book. So 2 or 3 days in, I had a bit of a battering then the one day where we were just busy and in PP all day. So I had a bit of a rest a couple of days, but going in on my day off, going in early, leaving late, I made sure I was really committed to it, and yeah.
How was the actual? There must have been. I mean, these are your colleagues, yes? Maybe you'd like to explain something about the picture that we've got up at the moment.
Yeah. So this picture here is the physio team, and there's one ITU nurse there as well. And every day the physios came around. They don't get a lot of mentions, to be honest. But every day the physio teams were coming in red PP and sitting the patient up, and just trying slowly but surely trying to get him moving again. Really, this was taken in the second ITU. So our one ITU was full of patients. So this was our second ITU. That day there was 4, 5, maybe 6 patients there, and yeah, the physio spent about 3 or 4 hours going around each patient and and sitting them forward like this and doing different exercises with them. Really,
I'm intrigued by. This is quite an emotional picture, and how did you deal with the emotional impact of what was happening?
I'm quite lucky that at home, my family and I've got really good friends that work in the hospital as well.
Mhm.
It was I'm not sure for this. There was times where there was things that we've seen and that the public don't see, and it
Mhm.
was difficult. I'm only now realizing after. I wouldn't say after the worst is over because it's not, because I do worry that it's we're going to have a second turn of this,
Mhm.
but now I'm starting to think about it a bit more. Yeah, so I'm only starting to process it in my mind really. So for me, it was I'm able to contribute in my job. I wanted to go into work with a camera,
Mhm.
and that's just another thing that got me out of bed in the morning, that got me into work, capturing these moments.
Yes.
Um, and for someone who's got a history of mental health as well, it was really important that my boss, my family, my friends were behind me in this. And to be honest, there's not many hospitals like Neville Hall, because they're even people I didn't know, I'm friends with now that have come off the wards and
Right.
helped out in ITU. So yeah, it's one day at a time, I think.
Did your camera allow you to isolate yourself from what was happening?
I think so, a little bit. It was sort of you hear it a lot in photography, a fly on the wall.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it did to a certain degree, but then there were moments where, I wouldn't have seen if I was, over in theaters, for example. I'm sure there's pictures later on in the slides
Yeah.
that people will see what I'm talking about. But yeah, it allowed me to take a step back, and that also, then I was also able to notice things, staff notice changes,
Yeah.
and just to say, are you all right today, mate? I think it's quite helpful.
Yeah. Okay. And
Yeah.
dealing with patients, of course. I mean,
Hmm.
were there confidentiality issues that you had to deal with as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in this image just up on the slide now, there's obviously a patient lying there, and I made sure that his head wasn't in the image.
Mm.
But like with all images that are taken in the hospital, they've got to be put through the communications team.
Yeah.
So that's why it was really important that I had a close relationship with them, because it could easily say no, and then the images won't see the light of day. So,
Yeah.
but there's also, if you're going to take a picture of a patient go back to the ward where you've got the staff clapping, you've got to have consent for that as well. So
Mm.
yeah, there's been a few. Well, no, there hasn't been any issues. There's been things that need to be done properly.
Yeah. And what's going on here? Glenn?
So a lot of people think this is. So the lady on the left is a consultant anaesthetist, and the one on the right is a scrub nurse. And so a lot of people think the anaesthetist was having a breakdown, and but the truth behind the image is that she couldn't get her gown off, and and that's what I mean. You can't. I could easily say she was having a breakdown, and there was a big man hug coming in there, but it wasn't the case. It was she couldn't get her gown off.
Right.
The scrub nurse came along, ripped it off her, and the next two or three images of them laughing, really.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and this is again kind of a poignant picture, really, because
Yeah.
the whole gear actually focuses on the eyes, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And there's so many ways we communicate to each other, and but the eyes sort of that day there was that's one of the physios,
Mhm.
and you could tell they were having a bit of it was becoming difficult to motivate the patient to try and move. I mean, he was, very ill as well. I think she felt really sorry for him that day, and it's. But as soon as I walked in and saw her, I had to capture that straight away. So you
Yeah.
could tell there's a lot of empathy for the patient and everything there, and
Uh,
yeah,
How would communication must be difficult wearing all this gear as well.
it is. It's yeah, especially if you're in a segregated area where you need equipment and you've got to put signs up to the door, and yeah, it is. Sometimes it's just a nod, or sometimes it's. I think she was I was in the anesthetic room here, and she was in theatre. So in theatre, she needs to be in red PPE,
Yeah.
and in the anesthetic room, I was in amber PPE, which is a different mask and what have you. And she was looking at me. I think this was one of the cases, that the first cases we had in. and she was looking at me as to say, "This is a nightmare,"
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was in that PPE for about, I think it was 3.5, 4 hours, I think. So yeah, I wouldn't have got the same, photo 3 hours later. Put it that way.
No, indeed not.
Yeah,
This is nicely framed. Whoops, we made a jump. But let's talk about this one. I
yeah,
presume that's to measure oxygen levels and heart
that's it.
level. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's your saturation. So every day I saw this patient in the second ITU,
Yeah.
and every time I saw her, she was sort of gazing out of the window or into the lights on the ceiling, and
Mm.
she barely moved at all. But I saw this as she was, in a way, she was fighting back, and she just held her hand out, and this was an ODP as well, the same job as I do, and she held her hand out and gripped this members of staff hand, so tightly
Yeah.
that it was 2 or 3 days later, and she started getting better again, and now she's back up on the ward now. I'm not sure if she's gone home or not, but
Right. Okay.
but she's fighting back to fitness.
Yeah. Yeah. And that must be a joy to you.
That is, it's uplifting. I posted one on social media a while ago, and I think it lifts everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting angle.
Yeah, it was. So this is both friends of mine, actually, both colleagues. So she was standing up, and he was not barking out orders, but he's ex-military, and
Yeah.
we relied on them quite a bit, and so as I came around the corner, he was going to go in. He's doing a checklist for an intubation, and
Yeah.
I came around the corner, and how he didn't laugh, or at least say there's someone behind you, because I slid on the floor like Klinsman used to do.
Yeah.
And I slid on the floor, and that was it. And I took 2 or 3 shots and jumped back up. So yeah, but he was I'm not going to say who it is, because I don't know whether he likes being named on the internet. But for me, he was one of the people who motivated you and wanted to do well for him and for all your mates, and obviously the patients.
Yeah. A couple of questions that come in, Glenn. Was it difficult to keep yourself in the background during the making of these images? And in an emotional sense, I mean, as these are your work colleagues and patients you see on a daily basis. So was that a difficulty for you?
It was difficult. Yeah, it's a lot of the time when I took because I've got experience of working in accident and emergency and obstetrics and now and again in ITU. It was difficult times, but I just used it as an extra alarm in a way. If the ventilator's alarming and the nurse doesn't hear it, I'll go over to the nurse and I'll say, your ventilator's alarming,
Right.
you might need to do this or something. But yeah, it was hard to take a step back, and there's certain images that will live with me forever. There's some that aren't on here, and some that are in the book.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was hard to take a step back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's but the one good thing is that you knew how everything worked, didn't you?
Yeah.
You know where to stand, you know where to go, you know when you're in the way and not. So in that respect, it was your environment, so you could work with that environment.
Definitely, I was comfortable, really comfortable. It was, as I said, I've been in ITU, I've been in A&E, and if there was an emergency, then I would have dropped the camera and got involved, because my job comes first
Yeah.
before any photo, really. So yeah, and obviously the patient comes first, but there's issues around there as well,
Okay.
because I'm in the job and I know what's going on. There's a time to put the camera down in an emergency situation, cardiac arrest or anything. I don't want to be putting photos out there of patients being, at death's door and the family seeing them. There's a certain, you've got to be wary of things like that.
Of course, yeah, and obviously you have empathy with the people who are suffering.
Mhm.
And another little question has come in, which is kind of pertinent, I think. Do you try to avoid watching the news when you're off shift?
Yeah, yeah. I try not to. Yeah, to be honest, most of the time I really appreciate my time off now, and my annual leave and stuff. And
Mm.
the last thing I want to hear about, to be honest, is coronavirus. And if I talked about it at home, my wife would give me a smack. Um, but yeah, I tried to take a backward step from it when I'm home, and yeah, I don't really want to. If there's anything negative on the news, then I've got to look after myself mentally as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess this shot is about communication, is it? Is it a patient communicating with somebody,
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
there is. So it's a ITU nurse with a gentleman who. Obviously, at the moment, we can't have relatives in the hospital
Mhm,
visiting patients, especially in ITU.
mhm,
So this is their way. The ITU staff and management there, they've got a heart of gold. They got these mobile phones in, and so they can WhatsApp members of the family. So obviously, the patient can see them, and they can see their relative.
mhm.
It's a moments of even this moment for staff, the patient was semi-sedated, and for staff to hear, you know, um, really personal things and upsetting things at times about, praying that they're going to get better and stuff, and it's difficult to hear for everyone. One of the things that really upset me was same patient. They put a mobile phone next to his head and played recordings from his grandchildren,
Wow.
and they sounded like my kids, and they sounded like how they would talk to my father.
Yes.
And just to think about what they're going through, the family and what have you, it's heartbreaking.
Just a sort of a question not really related to the pictures as such, but how is it going to change things, Glenn?
How are the pictures, or you mean?
Well, the pictures will change things because
Yeah.
they will inform people,
Hmm.
and from your point of view, and from. But do you think that things will change as far as the NHS goes? And people accept.
Yeah, it's yeah. I hope it will. I mean, we've realised now, and not just the NHS, the key workers in the country. We take so many things for granted. And I think now people will hopefully realise how important the NHS is, and how important the key workers are. Because without the NHS and the key workers and what have you,
Mhm,
I think the country will sink, to be honest.
mhm,
But then will it change in pay rises
mhm.
and actually the government, you know, uh, with the NHS? I don't think it will.
Okay. Another little question has come in, and it's pertinent since we see this gentleman obviously on his way to recovery. Thumbs up.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
did individual staff and patients did they have to give? Well, obviously they had to give their permissions, but did they have
Mm.
to sign model release forms then for you?
Yeah, so this gentleman, I had no intention of photographing any patients, in like a portrait like this. And what happened was this gentleman's wife called in and asked for a good photo, really, of her husband,
Mm,
and they called me. The ITU, again, through good communication and good relationships, the ITU staff called me to come over. So I asked him if is it okay to take your photo, and I called his wife, had a chat to his wife over the phone, who was lovely, and that was it, really. I got so there's different consent forms in the NHS, and I got a consent form filled out
mhm.
with this gentleman. I had a chat to the communications team, but the great thing to come out of it is that I was able to send his wife the high res images,
Yeah,
um, and they'll cherish them,
of course.
for the rest of it, because he was struggling at one point. So
Yes. And there's a brightness in his eye as well, isn't it? He's
there
kind
is,
and that's
yeah,
a beautiful thing to see.
yeah.
By the way, obviously your staff will know that it's going to be a book. Does this gentleman know that he's going to be in a book?
Yeah, yeah, they do. Yeah. So, yeah, when I talked to this gentleman's wife, when I went to see him on the ward as well, yeah, they know, they were very excited. I said, I'll get a few free copies and bring them to you, and when obviously the lockdown is finished with, but they were like, no, we want to give something back. So yeah, they know they're going to be in a book.
Yeah.
There's only sort of one or two patients, I think, in the book, and there was other requests from family to take pictures, but it was difficult to get then the consent. you know, as in written consent, even in an email or something. So then it's just not. You don't want the problem that may bring. You know, if you haven't got the right consent in place. So I've left them out.
Another interesting photograph is the eyes
Mhm.
again, isn't it? It's that compassion you see on
Yeah.
Jess's face in her
Mhm.
eyes
Yeah.
for a patient. That's
So
very emotional. And I mean, holding hands as well. You know.
yeah. So this is one of my, if not my favorite photo. So I was in ITU in a separate room, so there's a bit of reflection from the grass, not grass, sorry, the glass even, and yeah, so you could see it in color. But Jess is holding hands with an ITU nurse, but the both of them are holding hands with a patient.
Yes.
So yeah, the patient was obviously frightened. She was scared, and you know they just drifted off to sleep. So you know, and it's how things can change as well. This lady was working, I think, the day before or 2 days before,
Gracious.
and just like that, she's been intubated in ITU and then you know on a ventilator. So yeah,
Wow. That's a very good image.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
with
you.
you there. It's another couple of things that come in. This is incredible and very powerful work. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us to do it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, this is making me very emotional. This chat, stunning.
Mm, thank you.
This again. That's another. I mean, what do you say? Take me through.
Yeah, it's so this one is a couple of things I didn't expect. I didn't even know they did this in ITU, to be honest. I could see why it's another form of communication, as we said. But yeah, this lady, so she had a tracheostomy in, and you know there were certain things I had to do with the image. There's, you know, I had the patient's armband, so
Yes.
I've taken the patient's details out. You know, it's
Yes. Yeah.
but as soon as they put up the A4 piece of paper and had those three things written on there,
Hmm.
um, I knew she was going to point to pain. So I don't know why. It's just, you know, I just had a feeling, and
Mm.
I took the shot. And you get a feeling sometimes you've taken a powerful image, you know,
Yeah.
and it's certainly one that's stuck out for me. And it's funny that I took 3 or 4 shots, but this is the one where it looks like she's actually pressing on the paper, and it I don't know, it was, but it's also how hard ITU nurses. I say how hard they've got a very they give a lot of empathy and everything. But for me, just seeing that, you know, I left after this image because I got really emotional about it.
Yeah.
Whereas ITU nurses said, you know, right, she's in pain, um, let's sort it out.
Getting on,
And
getting on with the job. Yeah.
exactly, you know, they're amazing, you know,
Mm.
and yeah, I believe this patient's now gone back to the ward as well. So
Yeah.
you know, it's testament to the staff and the you know the fight within the patient as well.
Yeah, and it's down to basics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Another question's come in on quite an important one, I think. One from me. Were you using a discrete camera, or was it very obviously a big DSLR with pro?
Yeah, so I used a Nikon D5200. So that one has one of those rotating LCD screens.
Mm-hmm.
What I found is the first day, as soon as you put that camera up to your face, people were, it was almost like you were holding a weapon.
Yes.
So I decided to use the LCD screen, and at first, you know, I wasn't bringing much attention to myself because I was looking obviously down at the screen, but I just felt if people couldn't see me putting that camera to my eye, they wouldn't look over at me, and it did help me sort of not get too much attention. And it was getting used to it though. You're in live view, you know, and it's there's a couple of shots that I missed, and it irritated me, but I
Mm.
got used to it then. And so yeah, just a 50 millimeter lens, prime lens,
Yeah.
1.8, and so it's nothing, you know, too big. If I walked in there with a huge camera with a massive lens on, I'd have got very different results, I think.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Another really quite poignant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this one, this one actually.
Yeah,
It's the unfinished word, but you know what it is.
yeah. So this lady was very, yeah, she just couldn't settle at all. It was, and she kept, signing that she wanted to write something down. So they've got her the board and the marker pen, and as soon as she started writing it, it was, again, it's one of those moments where your heart just sinks, and you're thinking, if anything, you want to help straight away. You want to, you want to hold her hand. You want to tell her everything is going to be all right. And yeah, it was another image that it's strong. It hits home really how
Yes.
difficult it can be in IT as well for staff and patients.
Yeah. And this one blows me away.
So yeah, so this one I put this. I mentioned this one because sometimes what you photograph and what it actually means is two different things. So, but when I walked into work the one day and that was written on the board, at first I took it as, well, you can imagine what I took it as. You could tell on the writing, but then I later found out that if a patient sadly passed away in theatre or IT or wherever really, it meant that they wouldn't use a body bag. Not that there were like no body bags left in the whole of Wales because people are dying, So it was a. I still felt, without explaining it, it's a really strong photo, but it's just, that is when everything became real. Everything became. You saw that and thought, this is kicking off now.
Yeah. Strong stuff.
Thank you.
I suppose. I mean, us guys who are living on the outside have no idea what it's really like, but and I suppose we never will. But this photograph, which is the last photograph in the series, is just joyous.
It is. It's and it was again working those close relationships with the communications team and members of staff. I'd never had any intention of photographing a C-section. But I got talking to Aneurin Thomas as well, who's a friend of mine, and she's the first baby in the NHS. And she agreed to write in the book. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we had a photo of a C-section? And that was it. I went in the next day. I had a chat to the communications team about what I should do with consent and everything. And that was it. I met this two lovely couple who said that we missed out on photos before. I think it was with the hospital, Bounty, I think it was called. And they were delighted. And of course, what made me even happier was that I've got an image for them that I could send over within sort of an hour, after I got home, and they could cherish that for the rest of their days. And they gave permission for it to be in a book. And yeah, it's ending on a high,
Yes. And talking about the book, how did the book idea happen?
So all I wanted to do was document, the pandemic and do a little, like a Vistaprint book for the staff really. And then of course I sort of put one image on social media and it started, getting momentum, and then I put another one on, and before I knew it, I had people, the media messaging me, wanted to use images. So eventually I got in touch with Graffeg, and I've chat about the book, and then two other publishing companies contacted me then. So yeah, I had three sort of, well, not offers. I had one offer, but I had two interest from two other parties. But it was always Graffeg for me because it's, my auntie reads a lot of the books that they publish as well. So yeah, that was it really.
So no pressure then from your aunt.
No, nothing, none at all. No.
I mean, I guess the whole thing is life-changing. How do you figure it will change your life from a photographer's point of view? I mean,
yeah, I think it will. I've always been one of these people that I do a project and I move on really. But I remember being interviewed by Ffoton, as I said earlier on, in 2015, 2016, and I think it was you asked me that you said, what are you going to do next? And I said, well, I'll probably stop this now and what the project I was doing, and I'll move on. And you said, oh, you'll never never stop doing a project, just, go on to something else or what have you.
Yeah.
And so I don't know where it'll lead, and I'll keep photographing it and see what happens really. And yeah, but as a person, my tolerance for, you know, crap really is not very high now.
I don't. I'm really, because I've seen the PDF of your book, and
Yeah,
some other stunning images
thank
involved.
you.
From the text point of view, tell me who you got to write the text for you.
Yeah, so it's the first person I wanted to get involved with and write a few words was Amy Jones, Dr. Amy Jones.
Right.
She's been everywhere, She's been in Afghanistan. She's run a hospital out there, and she's been about 2 weeks before it kicked off in the hospital, and all the elective, cases got cancelled.
Mm.
She was the one that said, we should be worrying about this, and I think a lot of people took it seriously then.
Mhm.
So Amy's written about 4,000 or 5,000 words, and I've got Jamie Roberts, obviously a doctor, but well known for his rugby,
Yes.
has written an introduction. Michael Sheen has contributed just a couple of sentences, which is brilliant, and Aneurin Thomas. So to go along with that image at the end
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
of with the baby, Aneurin Thomas has written a couple of paragraphs. So that's the 4 people I wanted really.
There's another sort of comment that's come in. I can't imagine what it's like working on the front lines. Has photography helped you process how it feels to be in that position?
Do you know what? I don't think it has yet. It should do, I suppose, but I've been so busy with work and photography
Mhm.
that sometimes it feels a bit surreal, and it feels a bit like a movie. But I think when it dies down, hopefully it dies down, and we don't get a second wave of this, I think then I'll process it a bit more. And I do worry about my friends and colleagues with PTSD, and
Yeah.
and it's I've seen nurses, and I've seen nurses with taking their masks off and the markings over their face, and a couple of nurses have their noses are bleeding and stuff, and so I think it's more when this is done, I think people are going to need a lot of care.
Mhm. Um, how do you see the future?
Um, in NHS or in
Well, in both, in your
both?
photography and in the
Um,
NHS.
NHS. So future. Well, as I said earlier on, I really hope that especially the government, they appreciate the NHS a lot more. I mean, we have really stepped up, and not just theatres, ITU, obstetrics. There's nurse auxiliaries. There's people forget about domestics. They're going into ITU areas dressed in full PPE.
Yeah, yeah.
And the porters as well are being in the area. So I hope it's appreciated a lot more. Um, I worry that it's not going to be. But as a future for me as a practitioner, I'm probably going to be moving to a bigger hospital in Cwmbran at some point. So, and as a photographer, I don't know really. I like to capture true moments, and I like to document everything that's going on. But 1 minute I want to do documentary photography, the next minute I'll deal with mental health by doing self portraits.
Yes.
Whatever takes my fancy, but as long as I'm happy, I don't need to. I I don't care if my name is not remembered at all. I just want um, the images, to stand the test of time. Really.
I'm sure they will.
Thank you.
I'm sure they will.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very
much.
much for the conversation.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.